All right, y'all, what's up? My name is Gino Maggio. I'm back again here with Barber Strong. This is my model, John. Today, we're gonna be doing a mid-skin fade with a nice little shear cut using the new Barber Strong 7-inch shears. Okay, now I'm also a Babeless Pro educator, so today I'm obviously gonna be using all Babeless Pro tools. And on all of my skin fades, I always like to start off based on my model's wants and needs. Same thing with one of your clients if they ever come in and they ask you how high they want the fade to be. So I'm gonna be doing a mid fade, that's 2 fingers right up base above the ear, right at their temple point peak, bring it above the ear and at the parietal ridge and just drop below the occipital bone. Then next we'll go into my half, and that's gonna be open clipper lever, no guard whatsoever, and then the 1.5. And of course then I'm gonna be doing a little bit of debulking with the new shears and repositioning everything for his natural part and get everything set and squared away today. So we'll jump right in today with my trimmer. I always start off all my skin fades this way. And we're gonna put in a soft line rather than it being a hard line. That way being hard line is harder to take out once you apply your shaver and then trying to knock out 2 lines of demarcation at one time. So start right in, right at your temple point peak. Quick little wrist flip. Just gonna be using the corners of the trimmer. And of course fold down that ear. Now if your client has like a piercing or anything else like that, or like an MMA fighter and they do the cauliflower ear, just go ahead and just grab the top of the head here and just stretch and you'll be able to double that area of the skin. Now as I'm turning, just slightly just drop the fade. All this is doing is going to help to give me a nice little stretch on my blend later on. Next step will be going all the way in, open lever. There's no guard on this, so this is what we call a true half. And then next we go right in with my 1.5. I don't like to jump right to number 2 just because that's 1 extra full guard length that I have to try to chase out with my lines. Again, this is going to help me to give a nice little graduation on my blend later on. If you didn't already know, Barber Strong makes these nice dusters. Nice and soft, not harsh on your client's skin, especially if you have kids. Now, this is something that's kind of up for debate with other barbers. A lot of times, some barbers like to wait till the very end to be able to use the shaver. Some use it at the very beginning. I like doing it after I've already done all my sectioning. So I jump right in, 1 foil, right above the ear. And flip around to go to my double foil on the back half. Now I am bringing the shaver right up to the line of demarcation that I made in with the trimmer. Don't worry about if the line is a little bit shoddy. It's perfectly fine because now this is all going to be taken out by using the trimmer. I always like to use the same tool that I set the line in with. I like to be able to use that to take it out. And it's just a soft little feather out, nothing crazy. This is going to save you roughly about 10 minutes at the end of the cut. Biggest key with this here is that you're making sure at the end of the haircut your fade's not going too high, because if your client asks for a low fade, if you do your shaver at the very end, your line's going to go up even higher. Low fade turns into a mid fade turns into a high fade, and ultimately a high fade ends up turning into a free haircut. So you don't want to go and be able to lose all that time wasted on your client by then giving him the haircut that they weren't requesting. Next thing is going to be, we're going to go jump right in, all the way closed on the lever. We're listening for the crunch of the hair. Once I hear that crunch, I know I've met the new line of demarcation that's necessary. And now once I've hit that area, I go right to the midpoint of my clipper. and then I jump right into open all the way half. And if you remember at the very beginning, what was the section I did? I went skin, and then I went to the half. So now I'm meeting right back up, and I'm going back over that same area with that same half again, just making sure that I met everything and I got rid of all the hairs that I first set in. Now instead of jumping to my half guard, I'm gonna go right to my number 1. This way it's gonna mesh in this area with that 1.5 that we started in. And again, drop to the midpoint of the clipper. That's my technique. Closed, mid, and open. Back in the day, before we had locking detent clippers like a lot of the brands have now, especially like with Babyliss, we had free-flowing taper levers. The problem with free-flowing taper levers is that you never knew exactly the midpoint was of your clipper. So you kind of had to eyeball that. So you always went closed, somewhere in the middle, and open. So now with the locks, why am I going to change my technique after 23 years? I keep it in the same exact way. So I go right back in, midpoint, and then jump right into my open 1 or my 1A. And this is literally 1 notch below that 1.5 that I set in to this section here. Now we'll go right to my the half guard itself. I'm just using the corner of the teeth. Roughly about 4 or 5 of these teeth here, that's all I'm using to actually corner out everything. I'm going through my same motion, open, mid, and closed, or closed, mid, and open. Some people like to fade top to bottom, other bottom to top. I do a little bit of both just to kind of mesh in everything together. That just helps me to make sure that I'm keeping everything in exactly the way my client or model has asked. Again, remember everybody, these people have to wear these haircuts. We just have to perform the tool. They actually have to wear it. If you don't give them what they ask for, they're gonna find someone else that will. Okay, back to the 1.5. So now we're gonna go back over this area that we set in originally. Again, midpoint, 1.5. And the 1.5 open. Your half guard and your 1.5 are strictly just blending combs. Years ago when we started, we had no half guards and no 1.5s. So our half was literally your clipper all the way open, and your 1.5 was literally your 1 guard all the way open as well. Okay, so now next up, before we jump into this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a little over manipulation with the shears, and then we'll go back and we'll connect this whole area here together. I don't want to bring the fade up too high, so I want to make sure all this area is here, and I want to leave him with enough of a shelf, is what I like to call, and with some contrast here to give him that nice graduation on his blend. You see that he has this extra bulk here. I don't want to oversaturate the hair, but soak it up enough using for shears. And now I'm going to find his part. Because believe it or not, where he had his part line isn't even truly his natural part. So let's just comb it through. So now, that being said, I just take this little area here, this section, and I want to be able to take and stretch that hair. With these 7-inch shears, it's perfect for me to be able to really get a nice stretch. And with lighting, I can actually pull the hair up in a way and keep it away from myself and be able to get all the lighting that I need and cut perfect. And I comb the rest of the hair in place. Now I'm not trying to cut too much here because most of this hair is going to end up going back in as we comb it over, and the rest of this is going to lay down, and this will still be cleaned up with clipper-over-comb and also some shear-over-comb. So of course just trying to take care of some of that extra bulk that's not necessary. As you can see, these 7-inch shears are perfect for something like using shear-over-comb. Get a nice little vision of your pattern. The thing is with cutting hair, you're creating yourself a map. You're using your own navigation with every single one of the cuts. So I need to be able to give myself, these are like breadcrumbs. If you guys have ever heard of breadcrumbs when it comes to navigation, I want to be able to see everything where I've already came from to now. All right, so now that we're already done with the shears, we did the over manipulation that I needed in order to be able to kind of debulk the extra spot, because where John was combing his hair, again, was not at his natural part. And what I wanted to do was create that more of that shelf, give him that nice square masculine shape that we all have grown to love and are accustomed to when it comes to a men's haircut. So now from here, I want to be able to, now I can finish up this rest of this area still while keeping this area dark, because I want to be able to leave these hair strands here. So when John's putting in product in his hair, he can take that leftover excess and be able to kind of take on the palm and put this area so he still has a nice comb pattern. Okay, so now we're going to jump right back in with the number 1. And again, all I'm doing is now, this is all for just finesse. So I'm using an open 1. And again, just fanning kind of at the area. I'm not using the full bit of the blade, even though it seems like I am. I'm only using just the corner. Basically, the clipper is kind of off right now, off this head. And just free flow cutting all the way through. Almost like a clipper over comb kind of point cutting technique, but just free flowing in and corner cutting in. You just want to take a couple little steps back, use your lighting, check and see, especially if you don't have a mirror nearby, just easily just take a little step back and kind of see and make sure you're matching in with the correct area. No, you simply just take your guard off, go right in with a little bit of clipper over comb. What I love about clipper over comb and shear over comb is this is something that you have absolute full control of the area that you need to be able to work. So you saw we had already done the shear over comb earlier to give that little bit of that softer and textured look. And I go back in with clipper over comb and just don't white knuckle. You just simply just scoop up the hair and then just pull the spine of the comb back. This way it gives you that look of it actually stretching the hair out. So as you just scoop right in with your comb, I'm using the closer teeth, okay? You can use the wider teeth, but this, you really want the hairs to be able to pick up, especially these smaller hairs. So you want to use the closer end of the comb. I simply just scoop in and pull it flat. And now I pull back again, because this way the spine is riding along the head, but the hair is sticking out. This gives you that same look as like when you were using your shears and you pull the hair out and then you were stretching it away. This is giving you that exact same look, except that a clipper is also a mechanical shear. It just has a motor attached and you're able to cut more in bulk. When you're doing shear over comb, this is for absolute precision and being able to cut the exact hairs that are necessary. And then with the Barber Strong shears, that's where that clamshell edge on the tips comes in perfect handy, because you can just easily get in, it's not too sharp, and you can come in and basically just pick at each hair that's necessary. And we're going to turn you back. Now this technique here of corner blending, this is just like when you go and you come in and you take your shears and you work your way up. Now I can actually have that control of cutting each one of the hairs, and with that clamshell edge, I'm not going to be scraping or scratching at John's head. I actually feel like I can work a little bit faster because of that. Sometimes when the shears are too pointed, and it's natural for a lot of the barbers to like the more pointed edge on it, but you're very limited on certain techniques that you can actually do when it comes to something like this. This is for great detail work, and you'll see a lot of barbers out here on their videos doing this. Now this is just natural for you to be going back and forth, using a longer guard, shorter guard, again fading from top to bottom and bottom to top, and basically meshing all your different techniques and skills all together based on your client's hair, the hair type, their hair texture, their facial shape, whether they have the little knots or rolls or dark spots in their hair or anything else like that. Again, you're gonna use your lighting, you're gonna use your mirrors, you're gonna use any little technique that you also have. Another technique sometimes that I like to do is when I'm traveling is I take my phone out simply and I pull my phone out, I go to my video mode, and I'm able to turn my flashlight on my phone. This gives me a viewpoint of being able to get a wider perspective while still standing close to my model, and I can put a light on and I can see where there's any dark spots. This is something I do for my classes or when I'm traveling on a regular basis, and it works wonderfully. Especially if you're cutting on location, if you're cutting athletes or celebrities or anybody else like that, it just gives you a nice little perspective. And at the same time, you can record your haircut too. Okay, while I have them on this side, let's go ahead and attack some of the beard. I go all the way closed. Pretty much the same. You try to go the same distance or close to the same distance if you can that you went up on your fade. You go the same way down so everything stays symmetrical. So I go closed, short little motion, midpoint of my babeless clipper. This is our compact low pro FX if anybody was wondering. Then I go jump right into open. So this is my true half. So if you notice, I didn't go all the way down to the bottom of my ear when I went in with my half. I want to be able to still leave some wiggle room. So remember, y'all, from the bottom of the ear up is really just sideburns. And that's not your beard. Your beard technically starts from the bottom of the ear down, no matter where it is, because if you still match it, if you look from the bottom of the ear, look where I'm at. I'm lining up to the corner of his mouth. Most barbers or most clients like to have their beard starting at the corner of their mouth and then working their way around, because that's going to be the most solid point of hair to give them the most fresh looking beard. So now from here, I do a reverse C-scoop. I take my clipper, I flip it over while it's still in the open position, and I fan down. And as I fan down, I work my way in. So I do a reverse C-scoop. Because when you're C-scooping on hair, you're gonna come up this way and come away from you. When I do it reverse, I'm just flipping down and I'm just softening the area. This gives me the same cutting length as using a #1 against the grain, but while still giving me a softer look when it comes down around the sideburn area. So now when I actually shape out the rest of the beard or do the line, it gives that nice little blend and transition down into the rest of his beard. Okay, so now we're gonna move on from the clippers, we're gonna move on now to the shears. Now, best thing with these shears, what I love, again, is, we've talked about it earlier, is the length. The 7-inch shears, for me, it's easier to be able to extend, stand back, use my lighting. That's super important with me. And at the same time, I just don't need to have a super short shear where I'm getting too close where I feel like I could possibly cut myself. With the longer shears, I'm more conscious about my efforts and my cutting. So simply just go in, I've already wet the hair, start maneuvering everything up. Now I like to do a little bit of a different technique because there is this angle that's on the thumb hole. Instead of like most barbers that come in this way, I can still cut this way, but from a past wrist injury, I saw a technique online a long time ago and I've been using it ever since. I just simply take my shear and I move it flat and I tuck my thumb up and under. So this way I'm actually cutting like this. As you can see, I'm still able to stay far enough back and easily transfer. Now, I'm not one of those barbers that do all the flipping back and forth with the shears. I just simply do a quick little transfer. This isn't something I need to rush, because that's more reason for you to cut yourself. And I'm just cutting straight across and moving my way back and still following my traveling guide. Now with this technique, another thing that's great about this is that when I'm getting into an area where there's going to be an angle, I can actually pull, I can angle my fingers, and I hold this way. Now I can actually angle my wrist down. The best thing is too, you're not having to do all the chomping. This actually forces you to just use your thumb. Now, John didn't need a whole lot cut off the top, so I'm literally just cutting those wanted and more needed areas. Everything else was already going to be done with clipper over comb or a little bit of texturizing in the back, and that's something I also do I can also do with point cutting with the clippers. Now, again, the angle of the thumb hole, the fact that it also has the clamshell edge on the edge of the shears, this is all something that makes it super easy to be able to use these. And again, this is a shear that's a 7-inch Japanese forged steel and keeping at a price point of under $200. I mean, now who wouldn't want to use this? I've been cutting for 23 years. It doesn't make a difference of your expertise. You could be 20 minutes into barber school or 20 years behind the chair. You will still grab these, and there's still going to be a reason for you to use these along with any other shears you use. You can use these as an addition to the rest of your shear arsenal instead of something that's going to be in lieu of. So this is just something that I love, and I can switch back and forth between these very easily. Now for beards, fros, anything else like that, this is definitely something I like to use. So if I'm working my way around, I can even use these for these little strands of hair, because we're going to keep this a little darker and a little longer, and we've already blended the sides, and when I do the edging, we're going to keep a nice little transition downward into a longer area. But I can still now take the shears and work my way through and get those little flyaways that somebody may not be comfortable doing with a pair of trimmers or a clipper. All right, so now that we've finished up also too with the shears, and we've already done the one side of the cut, again, as barbers, a lot of times we use our lighting tremendously. So I like to cut one side of the cut at a time. So I always will start with the other side where my part line is, and then I work to the other side, and then I go to the back. That way I'm taking everything out in sections, and it makes things a little easier, and I can focus tremendously just on that one area. So we're going to go back in to give it a little recap. We did skin with my trimmer, we did open lever with the half, again with no guard on top, and we did 1 1/2. I went back in with my shaver, balded everything else out, then took that same trimmer and just kind of feathered out the line to give a nice little soft line effect. This way it knocks out both lines of demarcation from the trimmer and from the shaver. This saves me a whole lot of time, roughly 10 minutes at the end of the cut, so I don't have to use the shaver and then try to re-fade everything back up in hopes that I don't take the line up too high. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump right to my number 1. We're going to blend out from above this half line up into the 1 1/2 in hopes that once I get done with my sections, I end in this area with an open 1, because the top of the 1 1/2 is up through here. Again, we're just doing nice little short stroke motions. Nothing very big, just enough I want to be able to hear that crunch. You may not be able to hear the crunch in the video, but I can hear it here, so then I know that I'm in that specific area. Once that's done, I go jump right to the midpoint on the lever. Companies like Babyliss have a 5 locking detent taper lever on all the clippers. So this is going to ensure that I'm keeping my fade in the exact millimeter range that's necessary. You know, back in the day when we had free-flowing taper levers, we were so afraid of putting that pressure on the guard, and we would be going in with a half, and all of a sudden the lever would close up on us as we're working our way up. So it would be a half here and be almost skin up in this area here. Now with the locking detent, it keeps it in place. I can sit there and I can tap this with my finger as hard as I want. It's not going to move out of that spot. So until I actually apply enough pressure to move it myself, then it'll actually stay there. So these clippers go from a 0 to a half with 3 different levels that are in between. So now my next step is I jump right to my 1 1/2. and I want to go back over this area again. Again, it doesn't make a difference that you've already cut it when you did the sectioning. You can definitely miss some hairs when you're trying to cut out the bolt. So this is just my own nice little checklist that I like to do and make sure I got all those hairs necessary. I don't hear the crunch, and then I'm good. I know I cut everything. Now I'll go through all my taper lever notches again. Again, the first clip, the third, and then the fifth. So they go close, mid, and open. I'll use the second and the fourth notches that are on the clipper for, you know, things like little notches and ridges and deep little recessions into the hair and dark spots and stuff like that, things that I can just corner out easily. But other than that, unless you're really trying to give this very ultra detailed haircut, you're not going to need to use the second and the fourth notches, in my opinion. That is just something that is just going to be for extra work, something great for an Instagram post, but you can still give those same results in a lot faster time by cutting out those extra steps. Now we'll go back in with my half guard. And this is just going to mesh in these areas. Don't have to use much because I'm going to go back now and take out the line. And I want to just use my half guard for cornering. Take out some of these darker weighted areas. And I'll start removing the line. As you can see, just the short little stroke motions. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. Go right to midpoint. Now I'm focusing on these darker and light spots here. When I get to one of those areas, I want to make sure that I focus on that. Just kind of come in with a little bit of cornering technique and lessen up those areas a little bit more. Don't be afraid to go back and repeat over a step multiple times if it's just not to your liking. If you're standing in the way of the light or anything, you can click back and forth as many times as you need to. Trust me, in the end, your client's going to appreciate that. Now I'm not trying to go back too far here because then this back section, I'm going to be cutting it next. And just like we did before, I went back in with the shears and still did a little bit of soft cutting and point cutting in with the shears. When I mentioned earlier about point cutting with these, this is the technique that I was talking about. This is the perfect point cutting technique with these shears, but if you're going to be coming in from the top and trying to come in and do point cutting this way, these shears are just going to be too big or too long for you to do that. So this is something that is going to be nice and easy for you to be able to do for this little detail. All right, so lastly, what we're going to be doing for the fade is we're going to be coming in right here from the back. So again, we started from one side, we went to the other. So now this way, all we have to do is just fade a little bit around the occipital bone area and just kind of keep this nice little drop in here. I'm going to go back in with my trimmer and just kind of just lightly flick out that from that original line of demarcation. Now I can kind of match up where the fade is, and I can still see this flow. Now I can jump right back in with my clipper all the way closed. And you see just the short little motion, this rocking back and forth, right to midpoint. and then open. As you see, I'm kind of C-scooping and feathering out a little bit more here. And as I see how the fade is rising here, I'm trying to match the area here on the side and the area here on this side. I'm gonna drop back down to the midpoint and now just kind of corner this area. This is all just for finesse work, little details. Okay. Now instead of me trying to jump up to my 1 and my 1.5, I'm just going to go right there from bottom to top. Let's just go right in with my half guard, because all the extra work was already done for me already on the other sides. So again, I'm just going from closed point on the locking detent on the taper arm, from closed to mid to open on each one. And we'll keep doing this on every single step until I get back up through the 1.5. Now don't be afraid to go up and move in more straight in on your cut, so that way you can kind of visualize everything that you need. See where the hair needs to be cut. Basically where you need to bob and where you need to weave and where you need to cut and where you don't need to cut. So that way you're not doing yourself extra work later on. This is a 1.5 open. Now as I can already see, I need extra work that needs to be done here. Sometimes I just like to go and switch to a clipper, to a different one, how my adjustment is on that tool. Sometimes in this aspect I would be using a pair of thinning shears with a nice little tapered comb. But today we don't have a thinning shear with us today, so I'm just using everything in with my clipper. Now this is not a drop fade, fade just has a slight drop, but this is not technically a drop fade. So don't be afraid to kind of bring up the line a little bit as you need to blend this back in. I'm just still trying to keep where this knot is at on the occipital bone. I'm just trying to keep a little bit of slight coverage on here. Problem is if you bring that part up too high, then the rest of the fade looks like it's a high fade even though it's technically a mid. If you're wondering why I actually did a tiny type of a drop at the beginning, that was just to give myself enough of a wiggle room in order for the graduation to be able to stretch that blend easier. When you see the side angle after the cut, then you'll understand. So now, this extra little bit of weight that was here from this cowlet, this is very easy for clipper over comb. This is again like we did earlier, and just pulled in. Now I'm going to use the wider end for this instead of the tighter end of the teeth. I'm going to use the wider end, scoop the hair in, and just pull back. And work my way up and just keep going further up. As you can see, I'm also taking the comb and I'm lifting it up off the scalp. I'm not pressing up against the comb. Again, this is the same technique. If I came outwards this way and I pulled out and I would be cutting with shears, it would be the same exact angle. Again, I can turn my comb and cut more at a vertical line. Again, no different than if I took my shears and I worked my way up. You can point cut also too with your clipper. And then this way, you don't worry about ever cutting your fingers. Just kind of tease the hair to kind of get that flow and see how it's going to be, how it's going to lay after the fact. It helps keep your detail work in. Okay, so now with that stretching of the blend here, we went back again. We had already done all the shaver through this area, just lightened up the line of demarcation using the trimmer, and then worked our way up and kind of brought this up. So you can see John has a scar here, but his occipital bone is right in this area. So it's okay for the scar to be shown, but of course when you start to see the change in the hair and how the hair lays, this is the area where you want to be able to focus and still keep that area dark. Because then from the side angle, if you bring that up too high, he looks like he has more of a Marine Corps style haircut rather than a mid fade. Now for the hairs that are on the bottom part of the neck, this is very easy. Again, just take your trimmer, flip the trimmer upside down, put it flush, the blade flush up against the skin, and just work your way down. This is a nice, easy technique to be able to get those neck hairs, anything that's pretty much from mid part of the neck down. This is how you want to do this, so that way you're not raking or cutting at your client's skin. Same thing, you would do that on the underneath of the neckline from the Adam's apple down.